Hello everyone, welcome back to Elisa Maria Designs. I'm the husband, John, and as you all know, we're reading Jaws by Peter Benchley, currently up to chapter 4. And so without any further ado, chapter 4. For the next few days, the weather remained clear and unusually calm. The wind came softly, steadily from the southwest, a gentle breeze that rippled the surface of the sea, but made no whitecaps. There was a crispness to the air only at night, and after days of constant sun, the earth and sand had warmed. Sunday was the 20th of June. Public schools still had a week or more to run before breaking for the summer, but the private schools in New York had already released their charges. Families who own summer homes in Amity have been coming out for weekends since the beginning of May. Summer tenants, whose leases ran from June 15th to September 15th, had unpacked and, familiar now with where linen closets were, which cabinets contained good china, and which the everyday stuff, and which beds were softer than others, were already beginning to feel at home. By noon, the beach in front of Scotch and Old Mill Roads was speckled with people. Husbands, like myself, lay semi-comatose on beach towels, trying to gain strength from the sun before an afternoon of tennis and the trip back to New York on the Long Island Railroad's Cannonball. Wives leaned against aluminum backrests, reading Helen McInnes and John Cheever and Taylor Caldwell, interrupting themselves now and then to pour a cup of dry vermouth from the Scotch cooler. Teenagers lay serried in tight, symmetrical rows, the boys enjoying the sensation of grinding their pelvises into the sand, thinking of pudenda, and occasionally stretching their necks to catch a brief glimpse of some, exposed, wittingly or not, by girls who lay on their backs with their legs spread. These were not Aquarians. They uttered none of the platitudes of peace or pollution or justice or revolt. Privilege had been bred into them with genetic certainty. As their eyes were blue or brown, so their tastes and consciences were determined by other generations. They had no vitamin deficiencies, no sickle cell anemia. Their teeth, thanks either to breeding or orthodontia, were straight and white and even. Their bodies were lean, their muscles toned by boxing lessons at age 9, riding lessons at age 12, and tennis lessons ever since. They had no body odor. When they sweated, the girls smelled faintly of perfume, and the boys smelled simply clean. None of which is to say that they were either stupid or evil. If their IQs could have been tested en masse, they would have shown native ability well within the top 10% of all mankind. And they were being educated at schools that provided every discipline, including exposure to minority group sensibilities, revolutionary philosophies, ecological hypotheses, political power tactics, drugs, and sex. Intellectually, they knew a great deal. Practically, they chose to know almost nothing. They had been conditioned to believe, or if not to believe, to sense, that the world was really quite irrelevant to them. And they were right. Nothing touched them. Not race riots, in places like Trenton, New Jersey, or Gary, Indiana. Not the fact that parts of the Missouri River were so foul that the water sometimes caught fire spontaneously. Not police corruption in New York, or the rising number of murders in San Francisco, or revelations that hot dogs contained insect filth and hexachlorophene caused brain damage. They were inured even to the economic spasms that racked the rest of America. Undulations in the stock markets were nuisances noticed, if at all, as occasions for fathers to bemoan real or fancied extravagances. They were the ones who returned to Amity every summer. The others, and there were some mavericks, marched and bleated and joined and signed and spent their summers working for acronymic social action groups. But because they had rejected Amity and at most showed up for an occasional Labor Day weekend, they too were irrelevant. The little children played in the sand at the water's edge, digging holes and flinging muck at each other, unconscious and uncaring of what they were and what they would become. A boy of 6 stopped skimming flat stones out into the water. He walked up to the beach to where his mother lay dozing, and he flopped down next to her towel. "Hey, Mom," he said. Mother turned to him, shielding her eyes from the sun. "What?" "I'm bored." "How can you be bored? It isn't even July." "I don't care. I'm bored. I don't have anything to do." "You've got a whole beach to play on." "I know, but there's nothing to do on it." "Boy, am I bored." "Well, why don't you go throw a ball?" "With who? There's nobody here." "I see a lot of people. Have you looked for the Harrises? What about Tommy Converse?" "They're not here. Nobody's here." "I sure am bored." "Oh, for God's sakes, Alex. Can I go swimming?" "No, it's too cold." "How do you know?" "I know, that's all. Besides, you know you can't go alone." "Will you come with me?" "Into the water? Certainly not." "No, I mean just to watch me." "Alex, Mom is pooped. Absolutely exhausted. Can't you find anything else to do?" "Well, can I go out on my raft?" "Out where?" "Just out there, a little ways. I won't go swimming. I'll just lie on my raft." His mother sat up and put on her sunglasses. She looked up and down the beach. A few dozen yards away, a man stood in waist-deep water with a child on his shoulders. The woman looked at him, indulging herself in a quick moment of regret and self-pity that she could no longer shift to her husband the responsibilities of amusing their child. Before she could turn her head, the boy had guessed what she was feeling and said, "I bet Dad would let me." "Alex, you should know by now that that's the wrong way to get me to do anything." She looked down the beach in the other direction. Except for a few couples in the dim distance, it was empty. "All right," she said, "go ahead, but don't go out too far. And don't go swimming." She looked at the boy, and to show she was serious, lowered her glasses so he could see her eyes. "Okay," he said, stood up, grabbed his rubber raft, dragged it down to the water. He picked up the raft, held it in front of him, and he walked seaward. When the water reached his waist, he leaned forward. A swell caught the raft and lifted it, with the boy aboard. He centered himself so the raft lay flat. He paddled with both arms, stroking smoothly. His feet and ankles hung over the rear of the raft. He moved out a few yards, then turned and began to paddle up and down the beach. Though he didn't notice it, a gentle current carried him slowly offshore. 50 yards out, the ocean floor dropped precipitously. Not with the sheerness of a canyon wall, but from a slope of perhaps 10 degrees to more than 45 degrees. The water was 15 feet deep where the slope began to change. Soon it was 25, then 40, then 50 feet deep. It leveled off at 100 feet for about a half a mile, then rose in a shoal that neared the surface a mile from shore. Seaward of the shoal, the floor dropped quickly to 200 feet, and then still further out, the true ocean depths began. In 35 feet of water, the great fish swam slowly, its tail waving just enough to maintain motion. It saw nothing, for the water was murky with motes of vegetation. The fish had been moving parallel to the shoreline. Now it turned, banking slightly, and followed the bottom gradually upward. The fish perceived more light in the water, but still, it saw nothing. The boy was resting, his arms dangling down, his feet and ankles dipping in and out of the water with each small swell. His head was turned toward shore, and he noticed that he had been carried out beyond what his mother would consider safe. He could see her lying on the towel, and the man and child playing in the wave wash. He was not afraid. The water was calm, and he wasn't really very far from shore, only 40 yards or so. But he wanted to get closer. Otherwise, his mother might sit up, spy him, and order him out of the water. He eased himself back a little bit so he could use his feet to help propel himself. He began to kick and paddle towards shore. His arms displaced water almost silently, but his kicking feet made erratic splashes and left swirls of bubbles in his wake. The fish did not hear the sound, but rather registered the sharp and jerky impulses emitted by the kicks. They were signals, faint but true, and the fish locked on them, homing. It rose, slowly at first, then gaining speed as the signals grew stronger. The boy stopped for a moment to rest. The signals ceased. The fish slowed, turned its head from side to side, trying to recover them. The boy lay perfectly still, and the fish passed beneath him, skimming the sandy bottom. Again, it turned. The boy resumed paddling. He kicked only every third or fourth stroke. Kicking was more exertion than steady paddling, but the occasional kicks sent new signals to the fish. This time, it needed to lock on them only an instant, for it was almost directly below the boy. The fish rose, nearly vertical. It now saw the commotion on the surface. There was no conviction that what thrashed above was food, but food was not a concept of significance. The fish was impelled to attack. If what it swallowed was digestible, that was food. If not, it would later be regurgitated. The mouth opened, and with a final sweep of the sickle tail, the fish struck. The boy's last, only thought was that he had been punched in the stomach. The breath was driven from him in a sudden rush. He had no time to cry out, nor had he had the time would he have known what to cry, for he could not see the fish. The fish's head drove the raft out of the water. The jaws smashed together, engulfing head, arms, shoulders, trunk, pelvis, and most of the raft. Nearly half the fish had come clear of the water, and it slid forward and down in a belly flopping motion, grinding the mass of flesh and bone and rubber. The boy's legs were severed at the hips, and they sank, spinning slowly to the bottom. On the beach, the man with the child shouted, "Hey!" He was not sure what he had seen. He'd been looking toward the sea, then started to turn his head when an uproar caught his eye. He jerked his head back seaward again, but by then there was nothing to see but the waves made by the splash, spreading outward in a circle. "Did you see that?" he cried. "Did you see that?" "What, Daddy, what?" His child stared up at him, excited. "Out there. A shark or a whale or something huge." The boy's mother, half asleep on her towel, opened her eyes and squinted at the man. She saw him point toward the water and heard him say something to the child, who ran up the beach and stood by a pile of clothing. The man began to run toward the boy's mother, and she sat up. She didn't understand what he was saying, but he was pointing at the water, so she shaded her eyes and looked out at sea. At first, the fact that she saw nothing didn't strike her as odd. Then she remembered and said, "Alex." Brody was having lunch. Baked chicken, mashed potatoes, and peas. "Mashed potatoes," he said, as Ellen served him. "What are you trying to do to me? I don't want you to waste away. Besides, you look good, Chunky." The phone rang. Ellen said, "I'll get it." But Brody stood up. That was the way it usually happened. She would say, "I'll get it," but he was the one who got it. It was the same when she had forgotten something in the kitchen. She would say, "Oh, I forgot the napkins. I'll get them." But they both knew he would get up and fetch the napkins. "No, that's okay," he said. "It's probably for me anyway." He knew the call was probably for her, but the words came reflexively. "Bixby, Chief," said the voice from the station house. "What is it, Bixby?" "I think you better come down here." "Why's that?" "Well, it's like this, Chief." Bixby obviously didn't want to go into the details. Brody heard him say something to someone else, then returned to the phone. "I've got this hysterical woman on my hands, Chief." "What is she hysterical about?" "Her kid, out on the beach." A twinge of unease shot right through Brody's stomach. "What happened?" "It's..." Bixby faltered and then said quickly, "Thursday." "Listen, asshole." Brody stopped, for now he understood. "I'll be right there," and he hung up the phone. He felt flushed, almost feverish. Fear and guilt and fury blended in a thrust of gut-wrenching pain. He felt at once betrayed and betrayer, deceived and deceiver. He was a criminal, forced into crime, an unwilling whore. He had to take the blame, but it was not rightly his. It belonged to Larry Vaughn and his partners, whoever they might be. He wanted to do the right thing. They had forced him not to. But who were they to force him? If he couldn't stand up to Vaughn, then what kind of cop was he? He should have just closed the beaches. Suppose he had. The fish would have gone down the beach, say to East Hampton, and killed someone there. But that wasn't how it had worked. The beaches had stayed open, and a child had been killed because of it. It was as simple as that. Cause and effect. Brody suddenly loathed himself. And just as suddenly, he felt great pity for himself. "What is it?" asked Ellen. "A kid just got killed." "How?" "By a goddamn son of a bitch of a shark." "Oh no, if you'd closed the beaches." She stopped, embarrassed. "Yeah, I know." Harry Meadows was waiting in the parking lot at the rear of the station house when Brody drove up. He opened the passenger side door of Brody's car and eased his bulk down onto the seat. "So much for the odds," he said. "Yeah. Who's in there, Harry?" "A man from the Times, 2 from Newsday, and 1 of my people, and the woman. And the man who says that he saw it happen." "Well, how did the Times get a hold of it?" "Bad luck. He was on the beach. So was 1 of the Newsday guys. They're both staying with people for the weekend. They were onto it within 2 minutes." "What time did it happen?" Meadows looked at his watch. 15, 20 minutes ago, no more." "Did I know about the Watkins thing?" "I don't know. My man does. But he knows enough not to talk. As for the others, it depends on who they've been talking to. I doubt they're onto it. They haven't had any digging time. They'll get onto it sooner or later." "I know," said Meadows. "It puts me in a rather difficult position." "You? Don't make me laugh. Seriously, Martin, if somebody from the Times gets that story and files it, it'll appear in tomorrow's paper, along with today's attack, and the leader will look like hell. I'm going to have to use it to cover myself, even if the others don't." "Use it how, Harry? What are you going to say?" "I don't know yet. As I said, I'm in a rather difficult position." "Who are you going to say ordered it hushed up? Larry Vaughn?" "Hardly." "Me? No. I'm not going to say anybody ordered it hushed up. There was no conspiracy. I'm going to talk to Carl Santos. If I can put the right words in his mouth, we may all be spared a lot of grief." "What about the truth? What about it?" "What about telling it the way it happened? Say that I wanted to close the beaches and warn people, but the selectmen disagreed. And say that because I was too much of a chicken to fight and put my job on the line, I went along with them. Say that all the honchos at Amity agreed there was no point in alarming people just because there was a shark around that liked to eat children." "Come on, Martin. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't anybody's. We came to a decision. We took a gamble and we lost. That's all there is to it. Terrific. Now I'll just go tell the kid's mother that we're terribly sorry we had to use her son for chips. Brody got out of the car and started for the back door of the station house. Meadows, slower to extract himself, followed a few paces behind. Brody stopped. You know what I'd like to know, Harry? Who really made the decision? You went along with it. I went along with it. I don't think Larry Vaughn was even the actual guy who made the decision. I think he went along with it too. What makes you think so? I'm not sure. Do you know anything about his partners in the business? He doesn't have any real partners, does he? Well, I'm beginning to wonder. Anyway, fuck it for now. Brody took another step, and while Meadows still followed him, he said, "You better go around the front, Harry, for appearance's sake." Brody entered his office to a side door. The boy's mother was sitting in front of the desk, and she was clutching a handkerchief. She was wearing a short robe over her bathing suit. Her feet were bare. Brody looked at her nervously, once again, just feeling that rush of guilt. He couldn't tell if she was crying, for her eyes were masked by large, round sunglasses. A man was standing by the back wall. Brody assumed he was the one who claimed to have witnessed the accident. He was gazing absently at Brody's collection of memorabilia. Citations from community service groups, pictures of Brody with visiting dignitaries. Not exactly the stuff to command much attention from an adult, but staring at it was preferable to risking conversation with the woman. Brody had never been adept at consoling people, so he simply introduced himself and started asking questions. The woman said she had seen nothing. One moment the boy was there, the next he was gone. And all I saw were pieces of his raft. Her voice was weak but steady. The man described what he had seen, or what he had thought he had seen. So no one actually saw this shark, Brody said, courting a faint hope in the back of his mind. "No," said the man, "I guess not. But what else could it have been?" Well, any number of things. Brody was lying to himself as well as to them, testing to see if he could believe his own lies, wondering if any alternative to reality could be made credible. The raft could have gone flat and the boy could have drowned. "Alex is a good swimmer," the woman protested. "Or was." "And what about the splash?" said the man. "Well, the boy could have been thrashing around. He never cried out, not even a word." Brody realized that the exercise was futile. "Okay," he said. "We'll probably know soon enough anyway." "What do you mean?" said the man. "One way or another, people who die in the water usually wash up somewhere. If it was a shark, there'll be no mistaking it." The woman's shoulders hunched forward, and Brody cursed himself for being a clumsy fool. "I'm sorry," he said, and the woman shook her head and wept. Brody told the woman and the man to wait in his office, and he walked out into the front of the station house. Meadows was standing by the outer door, leaning against the wall. A young man, the reporter from the Times Brody guessed, was gesturing at Meadows and seemed to be answering questions. The young man was tall and slim. He wore sandals and a bathing suit and a short-sleeved shirt with an alligator emblem stitched to the left breast, which caused Brody to take an instinctive dislike to the man. You see, in his adolescence, Brody had thought of those shirts as badges of wealth and position. All the summer people wore them. Brody badgered his mother until she bought him one. "A $2 shirt with a $6 lizard on it," she said. And when he didn't find himself suddenly wooed by gaggles of summer people, he was humiliated. He tore that alligator off the pocket and he used the shirt as a rag to clean the lawnmower with which he had earned his summer income. More recently, Ellen had insisted on buying several shifts made by the same manufacturer, paying a premium they could ill afford for the alligator emblem to help her regain her entree to her old milieu. To Brody's dismay, one evening he found himself nagging Ellen for buying a $10 dress with a $20 lizard on it. Two men were sitting on the bench, the newsday reporters. One wore a bathing suit, the other a blazer and slacks. Meadows' reporter, Brody knew him as Nat something or other, was leaning against the desk chatting with Bixby. They stopped talking as soon as they saw Brody enter. "What can I do for you?" Brody said. The young man next to Meadows took a step forward and said, "I'm Bill Whitman from the New York Times." "And what am I supposed to do?" Brody thought. "Fall on my ass?" "I was on the beach." "What did you see?" One of the newsday reporters interrupted. "Nothing. I was there too. Nobody saw anything. Except maybe the guy in your office. He says he saw something." "I know," said Brody, "but he's not sure just what it was he saw." The Times man said, "Are you prepared to list this as a shark attack?" Brody responded, "I'm not prepared to list this as anything. And I suggest that you don't go listing it as anything either until you know a hell of a lot more about it than you do now." The Times man smiled. "Come on, Chief. What do you want us to do? Call it a mysterious disappearance? A boy lost at sea?" It was difficult for Brody to resist the temptation to trade angry ironies with the Times reporter. He said, "Listen, Mr. Whitman, is it? Whitman? We have no witnesses who saw anything but a splash. The man inside thinks he saw a big silver-colored thing that he thinks may have been a shark. He says he has never seen a live shark in his life. So that's not what you'd call expert testimony. We have no body, no real evidence that anything violent happened to that boy. I mean, except that he's missing. It's conceivable that he drowned. It's conceivable that he had a fit or a seizure of some kind and then drowned. And it is conceivable that he was attacked by some kind of fish or animal or even person for that matter. All of those things are possible. And until we get the sound of tires grinding over gravel in the public parking lot out front stopped Brody, a car door slammed and Len Hendricks charged into the station house wearing nothing but a bathing suit. His body had the mottled gray whiteness of a styrofoam coffee cup. He stopped in the middle of the floor. "Chief." Brody was startled by the unlikely sight of Hendricks in a bathing suit, thighs flecked with pimples, genitals bulging in the tight fabric. "You've been swimming, Leonard?" "There's been another attack," said Hendricks. The Times man quickly answered, "Well, when was the first one?" Before Hendricks could answer, Brody said, "We were just discussing it, Leonard. I don't want you or anyone else jumping to conclusions until you know what you're talking about. For God's sake, the boy could have drowned." "Boy?" said Hendricks. "What boy?" "This was a man, an old man, 5 minutes ago. He was just beyond the surf, and suddenly he screamed bloody murder, and his head went underwater, and it came up again, and he screamed something else, and then he went down again. There was all this splashing around, and blood was flying all over the place. The fish kept coming back and hitting him again and again and again. That's the biggest fucking fish I ever saw in my whole life. Big as a fucking station wagon. I went up to my waist and I tried to get to the guy, but the fish kept hitting him." Hendricks paused, staring at the floor. His breath squeezed out of his chest in short bursts. "Then the fish quit. Maybe he went away, I don't know. I waded out to where the guy was floating. His face was in the water. I took hold of one of his arms and pulled. Brody said, and it came off in my hand. The fish must have chewed right through it, all but a little bit of skin. Hendricks looked up, his eyes red, filling with tears of exhaustion and fright. Are you going to be sick? Said Brody. I don't think so. Did you call an ambulance? Hendricks shook his head no. Ambulance? Said the Times reporter. Isn't that rather like shutting the barn door after the horse has left? Shut your mouth, smartass. Bixby, call the hospital. Leonard, are you up to doing some work? Hendricks nodded. Then go put on some clothes and find some notices that close the beaches. Well, do we have any? I don't know. We must. Maybe back in the stock room with those signs that say this property protected by police. If we don't, we'll have to make some up. That'll do until we can have some made up. I don't care. One way or another, let's get these goddamn beaches closed. Monday morning, Brody arrived at the office a little after 7. Did you get it? He said to Hendricks. It's on your desk. Good or bad? Never mind. I'll go see for myself. You won't have to look too hard. The city edition of the New York Times lay in the center of Brody's desk. About 3/4 of the way down, the right-hand column on page 1, he saw the headline. Shark kills 2 on Long Island. Brody said, shit. And he began to read. By William F. Whitman, special to the New York Times. Amity, Long Island, June 20th. A 6-year-old boy and a 65-year-old man were killed today in separate shark attacks that occurred within an hour of each other near the beaches of this resort community. Although the body of the boy, Alexander Kittner, was not found, officials said there was no question he was killed by a shark. A witness, Thomas Degare of New York, said he saw a large silver-colored object rise out of the water and seize the boy and his rubber raft and disappear into the water with a splash. Amity coroner Carl Santos reported that traces of blood found on shreds of rubber recovered later left no doubt that the boy had died a violent death. At least 15 persons witnessed the attack on Morris Cater, 65, which took place at approximately 2 p.m., a quarter of a mile down the beach from where young Kittner was attacked. Apparently, Mr. Cater was swimming just beyond the surf line when he was suddenly struck from behind. He called out for help, but all attempts to rescue him were in vain. I went up to my waist and I tried to get him, said Amity Police Officer Leonard Hendricks, who was on the beach at the time, but the fish kept hitting him. Mr. Cater, a jewelry wholesaler with offices at 1224 Avenue of the Americas, was pronounced dead on arrival at Southampton Hospital. These incidents are the first documented cases of shark attacks on bathers on the eastern seaboard in more than 2 decades. According to Dr. David Dieter, an ichthyologist at the New York Aquarium at Coney Island, it is logical to assume, but by no means a certainty, that both attacks were the work of one shark. At this time of year in these waters, said Dr. Dieter, there are very few sharks. It's rare at any time of the year for sharks to come so close to the beach. So the chances that 2 sharks should be off the same beach at virtually the same time and would each attack someone are infinitesimal. When informed that one witness described the shark that attacked Mr. Cater as being as large as a station wagon, Dr. Dieter said the shark was probably a great white. Carcharodon carchariasis, a species known to the world for its voraciousness and aggressiveness. In 1916, he said, a great white killed 4 bathers in New Jersey on one day. The only other recorded instance of multiple shark attack fatalities in the United States in this century. Dr. Dieter attributed the attacks to bad luck, like a flash of lightning that hits a house. The shark was probably just passing by. It happened to be a nice day, and there happened to be people swimming, and he happened to come along. It was pure chance. Amity is a summer community on the south shore of Long Island approximately midway between Bridgehampton and East Hampton, with a wintertime population of 1,000. In the summer, the population increases to 10,000. Brody finished reading the article and set the paper on the desk. Chance, the doctor said. Pure chance. What would he say if he knew about the first attack? Still pure chance? Or would it be negligence? Gross and unforgivable. There were 3 people dead now, and 2 of them could still be alive. If only Brody had... You've seen the Times, said Meadows. He was standing in the doorway. Yeah, I've seen it. They didn't pick up the Watkins thing. I know. Kind of curious. Especially after Len's little slip of the tongue. But you did use it? I did. I had to. Here. Meadows handed Brody a copy of the Amity Leader. The banner headline ran across all 6 columns of page 1. 2 killed by monster shark off Amity Beach. Below that, in smaller type, a subhead. Number of victims of killer fish rises to 3. You sure get your news up high, Harry. Read on. Brody read. 2 summer visitors to Amity were brutally slain yesterday by a man-eating shark that attacked them as they frolicked in the chill waters off the Scotch Road beach. Alexander Kittner, age 6, who lived with his mother in the Gooseneck Lane house owned by Mr. and Mrs. Richard Packer, was the first to die. Attacked from below as he lay on a rubber raft. His body has not been found. Less than an hour later, Morris Cater, 65, was spending the weekend at the Abelard Arms Inn, was attacked from behind as he swam in the gentle surf off the public beach. The giant fish struck again and again, savaging Mr. Cater as he cried for help. Patrolman Len Hendricks, who by sheer coincidence was taking his first swim in 5 years, made a valiant attempt to rescue the struggling victim, but the fish gave no quarter. Mr. Cater was dead by the time he was pulled clear of the water. The deaths were the second and third to be caused by shark attack off Amity in the past 5 days. Last Wednesday, Miss Christine Watkins, a guest of Mr. and Mr. John Foote of Old Mill Road, went for a swim and vanished. Thursday morning, Police Chief Martin Brody and Officer Hendricks recovered her body. According to Coroner Carl Santos, the cause of death was definitely and incontrovertibly shark attack. Asked why the cause of death was not made public, Mr. Santos declined to comment. Brody looked up from the paper and said, "Did Santos really decline to comment?" "No." He said nobody but you and I had asked him about the cause of death, so he didn't feel compelled to tell anybody. As you can see, I couldn't print that response. I would have pinned everything on you and me. I'd hoped I could get him to say something like her family requested that the cause of death be kept private, and since there's obviously no crime involved, I agreed, but he wouldn't. I can't say I blame him. So what did you do? I tried to get a hold of Larry Vaughn, but he was away for the weekend. I thought he'd be the best official spokesman. And when you couldn't reach him, read. It was understood, however, that Amity police and government officials had decided to withhold the information in the public interest. People tend to overreact when they hear about a shark attack, said one member of the Board of Selectmen. We didn't want to start a panic, and we had an expert's opinion that the odds against another attack were astronomical. And who is your talkative selectman, said Brody. All of them and none of them, said Meadows. It's basically what they all said, but none of them will be quoted. Well, what about the beaches not being closed? Did you go into that? You did. I did. Going on with the article, Brody reads, asked why he had not ordered the beaches closed until the marauding shark was apprehended, Chief Brody said the Atlantic Ocean is huge. Fish swim in it and move from place to place. They don't always stay in one area, especially an area like this where there is no food source. What were we going to do? Close the Amity Beaches? And people would just drive up to East Hampton and go swimming there. And there's just as good a chance that they'd get killed in East Hampton as in Amity. After yesterday's attack, however, Chief Brody did order the beaches closed until further notice. Jesus, Harry, said Brody, you really put it to me. You got me arguing a case I don't believe. Then being proved wrong and forced to do what I wanted to do all along. It's a pretty shitty trick. It wasn't a trick. I had to have someone give the official line, and with Vaughn away, you were the logical one. You admit that you agreed to go along with the decision, so, reluctantly or not, you supported it. I don't see any point in airing all the dirty laundry of private disputes. I suppose, anyway it's done. Is there anything else I should read in this? No. I just quote Matt Hooper, that fellow from Woods Hole. He says it'll be remarkable if we ever had another attack, but he's a little less sure than he was the last time. Does he think that one fish is doing all this? He doesn't know, of course, but offhand, yes, he thinks it's a big white. I do too. I mean, I don't know from whites or greens or blues, but I think it's one shark. Why? I'm not sure exactly. Yesterday afternoon, I called the Coast Guard out on Montauk. I asked them if they noticed a lot of sharks around here recently, and they said they hadn't seen a one. Not one so far this spring. It's still early, so that isn't too strange. They said they sent a boat down this way later on and give me a call if they saw anything. I finally called them back. I cruised up and down this area for 2 hours and hadn't seen a thing. So there sure aren't many sharks around. They also said that when there are sharks around, they're mostly medium-sized blue sharks, about 5 to 10 feet, and sand sharks that generally don't bother people. But what Leonard said he saw yesterday, this is no medium-sized blue. Hooper said there was one thing we could do, Meadows said. Now that you got the beaches closed down, we could chum. You know, spread fish and guts and goodies like that around the water. If there's a shark around, he said, that will bring him running. Oh, great. That's what we need to attract sharks. And what if he shows up? What do we do then? Catch him. With what? My trusty spinning rod? No, a harpoon. A harpoon? Harry, I don't even have a police boat, let alone a boat with harpoons on it. There are fishermen around. They have boats. Yeah, for $150 a day or whatever it is. True, but it still seems to me the commotion out in the hall stopped Meadows in mid-sentence. He and Brody heard Bixby say, I told you, ma'am, he's in conference. Then a woman's voice said, bullshit. I don't care what he's doing. I'm going in there. The sound of running feet. First one pair, then two. The door to Brody's office flew open, and standing in the doorway, clutching a newspaper, tears streaming down her face, was Alexander Kintner's mother. Bixby came up behind her and said, I'm sorry, Chief, I tried to stop her. That's okay, Bixby, Brody said. Come in, Mrs. Kintner. Meadows stood and offered her his chair, which was the closest one to Brody's desk. She ignored him. Walked up to Brody, who was standing behind his desk. What can I do? The woman slapped the newspaper across his face. It didn't hurt Brody so much as startle him, especially the noise, the sharp report that rang deep into his left ear. The paper fell to the floor. What about this? Mrs. Kintner screamed. What about it? What about what? Said Brody. What they say here. You knew it was dangerous to swim, that somebody had already been killed by that shark, and that you kept it a secret. Brody didn't know what to say. Of course it was true, all of it, at least technically. He couldn't deny it, and yet he couldn't admit it either because it wasn't the whole truth. Sort of, he said. I mean, yes, it's true, but it's... Look, Mrs. Kintner, he was pleading with her to control herself until he could explain. You killed Alex, she shrieked the words, and Brody was sure they were heard in the parking lot, on the street, in the center of town, on the beaches, all over Amity. He was sure his wife heard them and his children. He thought to himself, stop her before she says anything else. But all he could say was, shh! You did! You killed him! Her fists were clenched at her sides and her head snapped forward as she screamed, as if you were trying to inject the words into Brody. You won't get away with it! Please, Mrs. Kintner, said Brody, calm down just for a minute. Let me explain. He reached to touch her shoulder and help her to a chair, but she jerked away. Keep your fucking hands off me, she cried. You knew all along, but you wouldn't say. And now a 6-year-old boy, a beautiful 6-year-old boy, my boy! Tears seemed to pulse from her eyes. She quivered in her rage. Droplets were cast from her face. You knew! Why didn't you tell? Why? She clutched herself, wrapping her arms around her body as they would be wrapped in a straitjacket, and she looked into Brody's eyes. Why? Brody fumbled for his words. It's a long story. He felt wounded, incapacitated, as surely as if he'd been shot. He didn't know if he could explain now. He wasn't even sure if he could speak. I bet it is, said the woman. Oh, you evil man, you evil, evil man. You! Stop it! Brody's shout was both plea and command. It did stop her. Now look, Mrs. Kintner, you got it wrong, all wrong. Ask Mr. Meadows. Meadows, transfixed by the scene, nodded dumbly. Of course he'd say that. Why shouldn't he? He's your pal, isn't he? He probably told you you were doing the right thing. Her rage was mounting again, flooding, resuscitated by a new burst of emotional amperage. You probably decided together. That makes it easier, doesn't it? Did you make money? What? Did you make money from my son's blood? Did someone pay you not to tell what you knew? Brody was horrified. No, Christ, of course not. Then why? Tell me why. I'll pay you. Just tell me why. Because we didn't think it could happen again. Brody was surprised by his brevity. That was it, really, wasn't it? The woman was silent for a moment, letting the words register in her muddled mind. She seemed to repeat them to herself, and she said, oh. And a second later, Jesus. All of a sudden, as if a switch had been turned somewhere inside of her, shutting off power, she had no more self-control. She slumped into the chair next to Meadows and began to weep in gasping, choking sobs. Meadows tried to calm her, but she didn't hear him. She didn't hear Brody when he told Bixby to call a doctor. And she saw, heard, and felt nothing when the doctor came into the office. Listened to Brody's description of what had happened, tried to talk to her, then gave her a shot of Librium, led her, with the help of one of Brody's men, to his car and drove her to the hospital. When she had left, Brody looked at his watch and said, Jesus Christ, it's not even 9 o'clock yet. If ever I felt like I could use a drink, wow. If you're serious, said Meadows, I got some bourbon back in my office. No, if this was any indication how the rest of the day is going to go, I better not fuck up my head. It's hard, but you got to try not to take what she said too seriously. I mean, the woman was in shock, for one thing. I know, Harry. Any doctor would say she didn't know what she was saying. The trouble is, I'd already thought a lot of the things she was saying. Not in those words, maybe, but the thoughts were the same. Come on, Martin. You know you can't blame yourself. I know. I could blame Larry Vaughn, or maybe even you, but the point is, 2 deaths yesterday could have been prevented. I could have prevented them, and I didn't, period. The phone rang. It was answered in the other room, and the voice on the intercom said, "It's Mr. Vaughn." Brody pushed the lighted button, picked up the receiver, and said, "Hi, Larry. Did you have a nice weekend?" "Until about 11 o'clock last night," said Vaughn. "When I turned on my car radio driving home. I was tempted to call you last night, but I figure you had had a rough enough day without being bothered at that hour. Well, that's one decision I agree with. Don't rub it in, Martin. I feel bad enough. Brody wanted to say, do you, Larry? He wanted to scrape the wound raw to unload some of the anguish onto someone else, but he knew it was both unfair to attempt and impossible to accomplish. So all he said was, sure. I had 2 cancellations already this morning. Big leases, good people. They had already signed, and I told them I could take them to court. They said, go ahead. We're going somewhere else. I'm scared to answer the phone. I still have 20 houses that aren't rented for August. I wish I could tell you different, Larry, but it's going to get worse. What do you mean? With the beaches closed. How long do you think you'll have to keep them closed? I don't know, Larry. As long as it takes. A few days, maybe more. You know, at the end of next week is 4th of July weekend. Sure, I know. It's already too late to hope for a good summer. But we may be able to salvage something for August at least if the 4th is good. Brody couldn't read the tone in Vaughn's voice. Are you arguing with me, Larry? No, I guess I was just thinking out loud or praying out loud. Anyway, you plan to keep the beaches closed until, what, indefinitely? How will you know when that thing's gone away? I haven't had time to think that far ahead. I don't even know why it's here. Let me ask you something, Larry, just out of curiosity. What's that? Who are your partners? There was a long moment before Vaughn said, why do you want to know? What does that have to do with anything? Like I said, just curiosity. Well, you keep your curiosity for your job, Martin. Let me worry about my business. Sure, Larry, no offense. So what are you going to do? We can't just sit around and hope it will go away. We could starve to death while we waited. I know. Meadows and I were just talking about our options. A fish expert friend of Harry says we could try to catch the fish. What would you think about getting up a couple $100 to charter Ben Gardner's boat for a day or two? I don't know that he's ever caught any sharks, but it might be worth a try. Well, anything's worth a try just so we get rid of that thing and go back to making a living. Go ahead, tell him. I'll get the money from somewhere. Brody hung up the phone and said to Meadows, I don't know why I care, but I'd give my ass to know more about Mr. Vaughn's business affairs. Why? He's a very rich man. No matter how long this shark thing goes on, he won't be badly hurt. Sure, he'll lose a little dough. But he's taking all this as if it was life and death. I don't mean just the town's, like it's his. Maybe he's just a conscientious fellow. That wasn't conscious talking on the phone just then. Believe me, Harry, I know what conscious is. 10 miles south of the eastern tip of Long Island, a chartered fishing boat drifted slowly in the tide. 2 wire lines trailed limply aft in an oily slick. The captain of the boat, a tall, spare man, sat on a bench on the flying bridge, staring at the water. Below in the cockpit, the 2 men who had chartered the boat sat reading. One was reading a novel, the other, the New York Times. Hey, Quint, said the man with the newspaper. Did you see this about the shark that killed those people? I seen it, said the captain. You think we'll run into that shark? Nope. How do you know? I know. Suppose we went looking for him. We won't. Why not? We got a slick going. We'll stay put. The man shook his head and smiled. Boy, wouldn't that be some sport? Fish like that ain't sport, said the captain. How far is Amity from here? Down the coast a ways. Well, if he's around here somewhere, you might run into him one of these days. We'll find one another all right, but not today.
Hello and welcome to Elisa Designs. This is the commentary for Chapter 4. Chapter 4 started on Sunday morning. Foofi has the zoomies. And John thankfully had to go to an open mic because the first 20 minutes was so impactful for me that I was happy to have that little bit of a break. And then when he came home 5 hours later and said, "Do you want to finish the chapter?" And I was like, "Okay." I just want to get this out of the way because you and I just came back from a walk, and I kind of started to talk about the commentary I actually formatted the video to be uploaded, and I was like, "Oh my God, we never did the commentary." So it's now Tuesday. That's my Ring doorbell. And so John and I were out for a walk, and I said, I've been thinking a lot about chapter 4, and I was so happy that we did it the way that we did it, because I didn't tell you how upset I was when you left and the things that I was thinking about in chapter 4.
Well, I'd like to add that I think we got spoiled with chapter 1 because chapter 1 was only about 9 or 10 pages, and so it was very, very gripping. It pulled you right in, and it really, sucked the viewer or the listener, the reader or the listener in. And so we read the first chapter, and then we did our commentary, which, our commentary tends to be fairly long. We usually have a lot of good questions and a lot of good points to be made, but I think we got, we got spoiled with that short chapter, because after that, these are pretty long, and it's
that was 20 minutes, and then you went to your open mic, and when you came back, it was another 55, almost an hour.
Yeah.
And that was a long chapter.
Yeah.
And John got to do what I was calling it summer stock, because didn't they do summer stocking?
What?
Didn't they do summer stock like out in Martha's Vineyard? Isn't that where is that what it's called? The actors?
Summer stock is just where actors go and do plays or whatever. I don't know.
But don't they do like those Shakespearean plays and stuff, like in the summer in the park? Or,
yeah, I guess.
Isn't it Martha's Vineyard? I was hysterical because when he came home and he read the remaining of the chapter, it's like the last 10 minutes. You didn't even see the editing.
Oh yeah, he was. It was very intense.
You've seen. Oh, I'm over here talking like you haven't seen the video. You've seen the video because we're in the commentary. Oh yeah.
It was intense.
He was screaming so loud. I actually lowered the volume for you guys because I was actually drawing because I was so worked up from the chapter before he left that when he wanted to read when he came home, I needed something actively to do with my hands, and I knew I was not going to be able to concentrate on diamond painting the mermaid, and so I took out pencils and oil pastels, and I started to sketch, and just anything was falling out of my crayons.
This last chapter, chapter 4, really sort of, I think we're really hitting my stride on like just bringing the characters to life.
You brought her to life all right. He was screaming. I was like, they're going to call the cops next door. I'm surprised the Grubs didn't call. I'm surprised they didn't text to see if I was all right. The way you were screaming. You didn't see it yet. You're going to see it when it uploads. But the first 20 minutes, and I was so thankful for that break, because as a mother, you got to let me get this out. As a mother, and my son was a little boy when I lived in Sarasota, when I lived in Florida, and I used to pick him up from Golfgate School. Hello, Golfgate, and all you Sarasodians out there. I would pick him up, and he had his little bike, and we would bike home, and he would be like, "Are we going to go to the beach? We're going to go to the beach." I'm going to be like, "Josh, I got the bike, I got your book bag. Let's get home first, do your homework." Now, we lived in a complex, so there was a pool. I could have amused him with the pool, but my girlfriend, Jean, used to say, "Come on, I want to go see the sunset at Siesta Key," which was 5 minutes away, so we would take him there. And at that point, he wasn't in the water, he'd be playing in the sand. But as a mother, in a split second, your kid, 1 minute he's there, 1 minute he's not, he disappears. And he did this to me. John doesn't even know this story, and I must have repressed this, and I can't even believe with the story that you told me as a kid, how you hid in the cabinet.
Oh,
They had to call the police. They didn't know where he was.
Oh no, they were about to call the police, and I finally came out.
And he was in the cabinet, in the kitchen, watching them all go crazy, look for him. I was in the Franklin Mills Mall. I was at the rack, and I was looking at T-shirts. I had my son's hand. I'm looking at T-shirts, and all of a sudden, I feel this. Like he was pulled from me. And I looked, and I'm like, I'm right here. I didn't move. There's really nobody around. Where did he go? I'm screaming. I had the security officer shut the door. He said, ma'am, nobody came in or out. I didn't see a little boy. I'm like, he was right here. He's missing. Hysterical. They shut the gates. They're getting ready to call the police. And my son comes out. You know where he was? Right where I was. He went inside the rack, and he pulled my hand. And hearing me screaming and everything else, you know, they're boys. They think it's funny.
Yeah.
He disappeared. But, okay, here's a really frightening thing that was true. My son was almost kidnapped. I used to live in Barbados also. At least 3 times out of the year I went out there for a month. And the demarcation line between where I was staying and the locals, there was a bunch of guys that would play right up against that line. And I was sitting outside waiting for our lunch, and Josh wanted to go where the boys were playing volleyball. The gentleman that was coming over with our lunch put the tray down. He walked over to Joshua and he screamed, beckoned him in. Joshua, come here, your mother has lunch for you. And I was like, oh, who asked you to do that? And Josh came running. He knew who he was. He had him by the hand. He looked at me and he said, when you're finished, please come into the hotel. Don't let Joshua go near those boys. And so I went in the hotel. I was like, what's the matter? And he said, you have to stay in this resort line. They were luring your son. They knew that he liked the volleyball, and they were luring him. You would have never saw your son again. And while he was reading this chapter, all these memories were coming back to me about the times that I lost my son. There's all different ways that you can lose your child. They break away from you for a minute. You know, they might be in some kind of danger that they get out of. And I cried after you left, thinking about this mother who had her little boy, and that was the last conversation that she had with him. Mom, I'm bored. Well, go play with a ball. You know, go get a ball, or go look for this kid or that kid, and they're not there. And the you know, you can't help but feel guilt.
Oh, of course. I mean,
the last conversation that she had with her son, and for what? And even if you're watching your kid on the beach, you could blink, and all of a sudden, they could disappear.
But her moral condemnation was righteous and real. You know,
it was
that they knew about Christine Watkins, and you know, the beaches should have been closed. And,
well, that was the other thing. When I did my thumbnail for this chapter, I named it Consequences, because that's what I was thinking about too. Your actions, your words have consequences, and you knew that you knew what the right thing to do was, and you did something else, and you hoped that you were going to get the same outcome.
Well, I mean, listen, you know, I think the author eventually did a very good job of putting us in the position of the very, in my opinion, good, moral police chief Martin Brody, who wanted to close the beaches down, but you know, he went against his own judgment. But it was only after, you know, all this persuading, cajoling, you know, they kind of wore him down, and
but
you know, again, it's.
You know what else I thought about too? Because we learned a little bit too more about the Brody household. You know, Ellen's making dinner, and like they have this rhythm as a married person, as married people. When she forgets something, she'll go, "I'll get it," but he really goes and does it. And we haven't been introduced yet to the 3 boys. So he's a father too. He's not just the police. He's a police chief.
He's the chief of police for Amity, correct? And then, but again, we've already had some discussion about this in previous commentaries, but you know, there's a lot of, and this happens every day in every city, you know, in every country. You know, there's newspapers. Again, in America, we're supposed to have a free press and all, and then there's newspapers and they're reporting, and then there's politicians, and politicians are twisting arms and trying to get you to do what they think is best for
Yeah, one man's taking the other.
It's about, you know, I think the real conundrum is Martin Brody just simply wanted to, if not just close the beaches, but he put signs up and say, you know, there was a shark attack recently, and you know, something like to that effect. And I think that his subsequent guilt comes from the fact that he wanted to close the beaches. He let political considerations and financial considerations and you know, other people, you know, again, they threatened his job.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, nothing is worse than the mother of the dead boy confronting him and saying, "You knew, and why? You knew. You know, you knew there was a shark in these waters, and you opened the beaches anyway." So
yeah, that was terrible. And also, when she is in the police station, and now you find out that there was a new who called the Times. Oh, he was on the beach. He was on the beach. He saw, or he thinks he saw. Or I can't remember who saw what.
The guy from the Times happened to be vacationing in Amity and was on the beach.
That's
like
right.
so,
That's what I said.
he wasn't there as a in his capacity
right.
as a reporter. He
Right.
was just
Right.
vacationing there, and
Right.
of course, you know, you as a reporter, you just
Right.
you get the story, and
and then you have
send it back.
her. You have this scene in the office where she's hysterical. She walks in and hits him with the paper.
Yeah.
Across the face.
Yeah.
And then you have his who was it that walked in?
Meadows or
Meadows.
no, Len the other cop. What's his name? Len Hendricks.
Hendricks. I knew it began with an A, and now I'll remember it now. Jimi Hendrix. That's how I
Leonard
remember
Hendricks.
it.
Yeah.
So when he walks in and he's like, "What kid? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the old man a mile away that was just killed." So like you got two attacks in one day.
Yeah.
And then it spills out about the original girl, Christine.
Right. I think Christine Watkins. I think that it was Hendricks who inadvertently mentioned the previous attack. Like, I don't think anyone.
Yeah, it was him. He slipped.
I think that I want to say the New York Times did not know about the first attack, but the Amity leader did, and I think after not publishing it, Meadows said, "I have to mention it now because, you know," and he's like, "Well, if you mention it now, you're going to make it look like I knew about this and
who are you
didn't
pin
close
it
the
on?"
beaches."
Yeah, and then who?
He said Larry Vaughn was the mayor that
The mayor
wanted it open for more.
And
Larry Vaughn's reasons for wanting the beaches open were
and he's still not stopping.
Are more than political. There's more to it.
Yeah, he's still not stopping. He was like, "Oh, hi, you know, did you have a nice weekend?" He's like, "Oh, up until 11 o'clock, I had a nice weekend." And you're closing the beaches. Like, how long are you going to close them for? And you know, we're going to miss July 4th. Do you think maybe what was he trying to save? We missed Memorial Day. Can we save July 4th or something like that? It was two holidays that were together.
I think he was saying that.
But nobody's
4th
going
of
there.
July is the make or break point for the summer.
4th of July, that's right.
If we have the beaches closed for the 4th of July, you know, we could pretty much be assured it's going to be a bad summer for Amity.
Do you think a town ever recovers from that? I don't even think that they would recover the summer after, because they would be like, "Oh, sharks go in that water over there."
Yeah, but what about? Oh, so I don't think I'm supposed to mention this.
Don't mention anything.
I already read the whole book.
He was already done. He
stop.
came in the bedroom. He's like, "I'm done reading Jules." I'm like, "I swear to God, if you tell me one thing, I will throat punch you."
I couldn't stop. It's too good a story.
In the middle of Friday's Live, he gave a big detail away, and I was like, and he just sat on the stool and he kept on talking. I was like, "What are you doing? Giving this part away." I didn't know it. And even this chapter, with how emotionally intense it was, I said to him, "We're watching the movie." I got my Discord set up, and I don't think, because the movie plays, like they do like a Jaws marathon, which is so stupid because for me, after one, it was over.
Oh yeah.
There was no more. There's, come on.
That's
leave it.
Listen, Hollywood, they just keep going after
They're
the
like
cat.
the mayor.
But some films just,
There is no. That was it. It was done. And
after that, it just becomes too contrived.
I'm saying to myself, I'll never watch this movie. And he said, you don't even know all the stuff that was not in the movie. And then we went into a Spielberg discussion because I said, you know what? This is all stuff that we're going to do after the book, after the movie that we watched together. And, talking about Peter Benchley as a writer and talking about Steven Spielberg as the producer and director.
I think the point I had made with Elisa was that, obviously Spielberg, as a director, had a certain vision for how to bring this book to life and put it on the screen, but, they went through a lot of trouble to make that gigantic, shark, and the shark was, oh God, every bit of character in that film, it was terrifying.
So let me ask you something, because me being in Martha's Vineyard and not knowing that this is where the film was shot, I had no idea. And in fact, I'm going to make a file of all my pictures of Martha's Vineyard and all, and Amity. I went into a restaurant, I think it was called Sharky's, and there was a big shark on the wall that they had, and his mouth was open, and you were able to stand in it. Was that how big that shark was?
Well, so the shark in the book Jaws, it's a great white shark, and it again, I think Quint and Brody estimated it to be probably 20 feet long, and its jaws are this big.
If that's the length of him, then the jaw mouth is big.
Yeah, again, and it's not just that. Those great whites, they have rows and rows, of teeth,
like razor sharp teeth.
Yeah, and so this is just a
it was
killing
a very
machine.
Yeah, it was. He didn't even care. He didn't care. He just sees something moving and he goes after it. And if it's digestible, okay. If not,
I think they mentioned it already, but it had something to do with some kind of flotation bladder. But I guess other fish or can rest. And a shark cannot.
Oh, he can't. Yeah, you read that.
A shark has to constantly keep moving to get water through its gills so he can breathe. If he ever stops moving, he will die. Yeah.
So that was the chapter, basically in a nutshell. We get introduced to Quint though this time, don't we? That's how it ends. We're gonna meet him, but not today.
They mention. I think it's. I think the guy who runs the Amity Leader, Meadows, mentions there's a guy I know that might be able to, catch or kill this
yeah, because
shark.
Vaughn now says, yes, get a boat.
Yeah.
They're going to go out there with Chum in their little boat.
I'm messing up. We might have to edit this out. I might be messing up in terms of what happened in what chapters, but anyway.
So you don't know this, but I just edited out the whole part because Big Mouth over here, Jaws, went and gave another part away. For me, he ruined this time.
All right, listen. What can I tell you? I'm a fast reader.
You're a fast talker. Think. So he's saying goodbye.
Bye.
My dinner is in the oven.
Yeah,
I'm glad we got this done. We got this
Starving.
done. You're like a shark. You never stop eating.
That's right.
If he ever stopped eating, he would,
That's
probably
right. I would
just,
die.
Yeah.
Me and
I'm going to
Foofi.
give up and lay down on the floor.
Me and Foofi. We're big eaters.
Yeah.
Right, Dad? Tell the viewers, Foofi, we're very food motivated, cat and people.
So that's it.
Come here, you monkey.
I
Say hello
told
to
you guys
everybody.
about
Come
the
here.
Discord. Now I want to see if I could send you guys the link. I don't know if I have to publish first before I send you the link. It's not done, but I had a lot of fun that night. I was up for like maybe 3 hours getting my Discord together, and I love the way Discord is laid out. You may not ever see me on YouTube anymore.
Go ahead, monkey.
Because it's so much fun.
Go ahead.
And you guys could take a peek around. And if I have to publish, and I'll just make it invite only and give only my members. He almost knocked me off the chair. I only give my members the link to take a look around. So I'll get that started. But right now, Tip Tuesday is uploading too. So
Bye, everybody.
dinner time.